Fold your paper crosswise and then place your hand on top of the paper. Draw some markings on your middle finger and then your pinky finger and draw something like this. The drawing should also capture your wrist. So make the lines thicker and clearer and then cut along the lines. And then get your felt cloth. So I'm using a red soft felt cloth, and then I'm going to trace the hand figure on my felt cloth, and then I'm going to repeat it on another felt cloth. So trace the hand figure and then cut along the lines. You should make 2 hand figures because we're going to sew them together. After cutting the puppet figure or the hand figure, place them on top of each other and then secure them with eye pins. Make sure that there are eye pins on all sides so that when you sew them together, the fabric will stay in place. Get your marker and draw a margin along the edge of the hand figure, which will serve as your sewing guide. You will be stitching or using backstitch for the edge of the puppet. So get your needle and thread, make sure there's a knot already, and start sewing backstitch. I'm using a yellow thread just so you can see the stitches. But if you want to use a thread the same as your felt fabric, you may do so. But if you want to use a different thread, different color of thread, you can also do that. It's up to you. So continue sewing backstitch, and then once you run out of thread, make sure that you secure your stitch with knots. And then you get another thread again, and then tie it with a knot and then start sewing backstitch again. Continue doing it until you reach the end of the puppet. Secure it with a knot and then cut the excess thread. And then we're going to turn over the puppet on the other side. So you roll over the puppet and then you push the back side, and then it should look something like this. If you use a thread the same color as your fabric, you won't be able to see threads like this. Since I use a yellow thread, you can see some threads along the edge, but it's okay. So you try it on your hand, make sure that it fits. Okay, there you go. Then get another bond paper, maybe half will do, and then you can start sketching your character or your image. As for me, I chose to draw a gasoline can. So that would be the theme of my pangalawa, because one thing that scares me the most right now is the price of oil and gas. So make sure that the drawing is clear and then cut along the lines. So choose a different fabric. So I chose blue, and then I traced the image on top of the fabric, and then cut the small part or the bottle part of the can, then trace it on green fabric, place it on top of my pin cushion to secure it, and then the other shape on another green felt. And then as for the flame, I cut the image again, and then I traced it on a yellow felt. So make sure that your small parts are secured. You can place them on top of your pin cushion, pin them on your pin cushion so that you won't lose the small parts. So I tried to see if the image will work, and then I will use buttons for the eyes. So you cut the big fabric, or the blue fabric, or the base of your character. Make sure that it fits on your hand puppet. You can now assemble all the pieces together, and then as for the green cap, I use overstitch to attach it on the bigger fabric or bigger felt. So I use violet thread and then used overstitch. I'm using overstitch to attach the green felt. And then make sure to secure your parts with knots. For the other shape, I'm going to use the same thread, and I use overstitch again to attach the green shape on top of the blue felt. I also secured the fabric with a pin so that it will stay in place and it's easier to sew. So overstitch along the edge of the green shape, and then secure it with a knot once done. So moving along, I'm going to stitch the flame, and then I'm using the violet thread again, and this time instead of using overstitch, I'm using blanket stitch. So whatever your image will be or design will be for the hand puppet, you can either use blanket stitch or overstitch for the attachments. So if you want to use overstitch on all of the parts of your puppet, it's okay. If you want to use blanket stitch, it's okay also. If you want to combine them together, just like what I did, you may do so. So I'm going to attach the buttons, which will serve as eyes of the puppet. So I marked it with an X already. So recall how to attach the buttons. You should be able to still remember it since that's what we did last week. I think I made at least 7 stitches for each side of the button because I wanted it to become thicker than usual. Then I secured it with knots at the back. You can also use another button or a different button for the other eye, or you can choose the same button but you can place it a bit lower, just like how I did. But if your character, your pangaluluwa character has only one eye, then you can attach just one button for the eye. So attach the buttons, make sure that it's tight and secure. You won't be making buttonholes, just attaching the buttons for this activity. Once you're done sewing the parts together, you can now check if the character fits the hand puppet. Well, it should be because you measured it earlier. And then try to secure pins on the puppet, and then make sure that you're pinning only on the fabric on top. So get your needle and thread again, make sure there's a knot at the end, and then sew the character on top of the fabric, the first layer of the hand puppet, and then use blanket stitch to attach the character. It's a bit challenging to sew this way because your other hand is inside the puppet, and you have to make sure that you're only stitching the character on the topmost part of the fabric. If this is too difficult for you, you can ask help from an adult or from your mom and dad. You may also use your thimble. I placed mine on my middle finger so that I won't hurt myself whenever I stitch from the inside. So the thimble will help protect your finger so that you won't poke yourself once you insert the needle through the fabric. And then stitch the character up until it reaches the topmost part of the hand puppet, and then make sure to secure it with at least 2 knots, and then cut the excess thread. So repeat the same process again on the other side of the character. Continue sewing blanket stitch. You can also use your thimble again if you want to protect your finger from stitching. So continue doing blanket stitch up until the topmost part of the fabric. I moved the thimble on my index finger instead because I'm using my index finger to push the needle from the back. So you can transfer the thimble wherever you need it to be. Then secure the stitch with knots again, and then cut off the excess threads. Okay, you also have to sew the bottom part of the puppet. So continue doing blanket stitch the bottom part. Still using my thimble to help me push the needle through, and then secure the stitch from the back with a knot. Since you can reach the back part already, you can secure the stitch with a knot from the inside. So there you go, ta-da! You have your Pangaluluwa puppet. Okay, make sure you can move your fingers around. There you go. Ta-da!